You do not want 250 extroverts at your event. It will probably get damaged. There will probably be an altercation because there's not enough oxygen in the room for 250 people who want to be the star. You have to have that mix of energies to do that.
Welcome to the Venue RX. On this show, we document and share best practices around owning, operating, and managing world-class wedding venues. All right, Rob, thank you so much for coming on the Venue RX today. I am excited to talk about all things guest experience. We're going to have a really cool conversation today, but thank you so much for being here.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Jonathan.
So before we jump into it, especially for the folks who maybe are joining us for the first time or, who are, just getting acclimated to our podcast and our show here, could you give them a little bit of an intro into who you are and, professionally what you do?
Sure. So I am what I like to call a professional guest on duty. So for the last 14 years or so, I have attended and chronicled over 2,000 different cocktail parties, galas, business meals, event activations as the COO of luxury lifestyle publications, basically Texas focused. But I've had the good luxury over the years to go to events pretty much all over the world. So, getting to really see top entertaining hosts and fundraisers really shine and really understanding what it takes, to put on a good event. And what I've learned along the way is the guest experience is such an important part of that because really any great any great event is really going to pay special attention to guests.
Absolutely. And, the interesting thing about this is, I think, and we were talking about this right before we got on, but often venue owners, venue operators, people in our industry, we're so focused on maybe the guests of honor, right? The couple who's getting married or the focus of the event, but we forget about, the 100, 200, 1,000 guests who are there who are going to develop a experience or they're going to develop a understanding. There's going to be a reputation that's formed about the property. So I think this topic is really appropriate, especially here at the beginning of the year as people are kind of thinking about some of their new priorities.
That is absolutely true. So yeah, it really is an important thing. And I will say, piggybacking on what you said, really any great event is going to be an ensemble piece. So any good, fun wedding, the bride and groom or the bride and bride or the groom and groom are basically, they're going to make sure that everyone has and feels special at a certain moment because everyone's there to celebrate their love. Yes, they're the focus, but any successful wedding or any successful event I've ever been to, the host really realizes that it's an ensemble and it takes the energy of everybody to make an event magical.
Yeah. So just before, and there's so many different directions, but before we get, technical and just kind of some of the more educational maybe pieces of this, I'm curious, what are some of the most fun events you've ever been to?
There's a lot of fun events. What I will say is fun is in the eye of the beholder. And really fun to me is really any event where people just bring an energy and there has to be this collective energy of people that really want to be there. I will say the most recent really spectacular event, and I would say a lot of them I go to are really great. The most recent one I went to was just before the holidays. It was this event in Dallas called the Crystal Charity Ball. And it was really just a magical thing. It took them 5 days to load in at the venue space. So, the activations were so exquisitely put together and so beautiful and so stunning that everywhere you looked, you were just visually stimulated. That the fact that it was in a hotel when you didn't feel like you were in a hotel was really just a magical experience.
Rob, I'm wondering, do you feel like there is always a correlation between the amount of money spent or the installations, the activations, things like that? Or is it possible to have a really premium experience with a fairly simple budget?
You can do both. Again, it's all about the people that you bring to it. So, let's say you're doing you're hosting a fundraising event. And, in my experience, I've been to things, a lot of things are at hotels, but I've also been at things like anyone who follows music at all may be familiar with Austin City Limits, the music show. So they have a wonderful venue, and in fact, the top grossing fundraiser in Texas is held there. It's held on a floor, and there's a concert venue. So there's all kinds of different ways that you can really take and create, a magical experience from that.
Yeah, I'm wondering, because as I'm thinking about, a lot of the venue owners who may be listening, a lot of the budgets or, what is driven by the wedding is driven by what the couple's willing to spend.
Right. And
different, obviously, from fundraisers.
I get what you're saying. And what I would say with the wedding piece is make sure, and they don't necessarily break the bank, but bring certain things in that people can take the experience away from them. So when I'm actually looking off camera right now, because I'll give you an example. So there's this company I work with called Vignettes, and they basically are a caricature artist, and it's not a budget breaking thing, but it allows guests to do a caricature drawing of themselves or get one done of themselves that they can take away and they can fondly remember the event and the experience. So there are ways that you can do creative things that may not be budget breaking, but people will talk about them, that you're offering kind of a unique and different suite of services. So I would always say, if you're not on a big budget, you don't need a big budget for something to be magical. But bring something in that's just totally unique that people will talk about. And even if it's, because obviously drawing a caricature artist drawing things over a reception, there's probably only 20 or 30 that can be done. Even if it's only 10% of the people, it's going to sit in your home or it's going to sit in that person's home, and people are going to ask about it and they'll remember where the venue was or where the wedding was. And it allows that word of mouth, which I know event venues really, really rely a lot on from a marketing perspective. It allows that to be done in an ancillary way because you as an event venue provided something unique and different for guests.
That makes a lot of sense. You said caricatures. I love that. What are some other things that you've seen venues, event, hosts do that kind of connect the guest with that event and leave them with a takeaway?
So a really good way is to, do a really nice parting gift, or, a gift of gratitude, as you could say, with somebody. And if you're talking about the event venue can just do something, as simple as partner with a local brand, and really reach out to other people in the community if they're wanting to do marketing. Because what I find is, I will say it's one of those things, it can be wasteful, event bags, after the fact. But if you partner with one, and especially with weddings, because a lot of people are not from out of town, so you don't want to give them a bunch of stuff. But if you give them a single thing that's kind of small that they can take with them, again, it's about, people won't necessarily remember what they ate at the wedding or a specific song, but they'll remember how they feel. And if you're giving them kind of a takeaway that kind of connects with the event, and what I would suggest with anyone who's, planning a wedding at their event venue, look at the couple, look at what their theme is, look at what you're planning out, then reach out to the community, get something that's kind of a really bespoke little trinket that, a brand would be glad to donate either product or sell to you at wholesale. So it's a much smaller thing that allows them to take that away with them, and that, the event venue space was what gave them that, or what brought them that.
That's an interesting thought, because a lot of times I know couples will do smaller things like koozies, or like just little things like that, right? That are a takeaway primarily as a reminder from, that the guest went to the wedding of the couple, right? And it'll say
absolutely
whatever, John and Jane and the date and whatever, right? But this is interesting. It's an interesting thought. If you are, the venue, and you're also doing the planning of the wedding, to kind of include something that is specific for the actual venue itself. So there's a reminder, maybe like more word of mouth businesses there.
Exactly. Especially if it ties into the couple. And that's why I said, reach out to a community and work with a local artist. And now, if your wedding's 400 people, that's probably not going to work. But, if you've got a wedding in the 100 to 200 range, you can probably find some local artisan that you can do those types of activations with, and tie it in with that. It could even be that if you've got packaging and it's a small enough gift, you can either put it in a bag with the venue's logo, or you can even put it in a nice little box if you've got that. And again, I always like to say with gifts, just make sure that they're small enough so that out of town guests do not leave them behind.
Hmm.
And, because I see that all the time is someone will give them this big, great gift. And then it's like, I have to go from, I hate checking a bag. And now I have to fly on the airport. Now they're stuck with this thing and they have to wind up throwing it out because they exceed the weight limit or whatever. So, you just got to be mindful of those types of things. If you do that, just make sure you're considering all the guests. And with a wedding specifically, I'd say more than any other type of event, there's going to be a substantial number that are going to be taking a plane probably to get there.
Yeah. And we've all, been at those events, I think primarily fundraisers and industry type events where they give you a bag and it's full of just kind of a bunch of tchotchkes that you may not want to take with you, right?
That's a diplomatic way of saying it for sure.
So Rob, I want to pivot a little bit because you're primarily in the Texas market. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
So give me an understanding of the types of events that you've been to and kind of the areas that you've been to events. I'm curious, like you have a wealth of this experience with all these events that you've been at. So where are those events and what are the typical style of event that you'll go to in this event?
Typically I'll go to and in Texas, the social scene and the philanthropy scene are very, very intertwined. So a lot of the stuff that I go to tends to be galas like the Crystal Charity Ball that I mentioned earlier. And most of them I would say the average gala I raises somewhere between, I'd say, $750 and $1 million. It's $1,000 and $1 million. So they're all really well done events. But like I said, I was bringing up that, the largest gala in Texas is Matthew McConaughey's gala, and it's at Austin City Limits Live. So they incorporate music, and like last year they had Garth Brooks as a guest, who did a musical performance. So what I see from a venue perspective is, a lot of the really good events, they'll look for something out of the box that makes them unique. So with that event, they make sure to not be in a hotel, and they keep it at 400 people, that are seated, and then they've got another 1,000 that can sit in the rafters, and they can sell separate concert tickets to see Garth Brooks in like a bespoke performance. And in fact, a lot of organizations, nonprofits, use that venue as an example to really create these bespoke experiences. Like I'm going to something coming up where Joss Stone is going to perform. So, organizations can bring in this talent that allows people to kind of draw in that, even if someone only has $100 or $200, they can actually, have a wider audience, with that. But and the events I go to range everything from black tie to jeans and a sport coat. And $1 million events do not have to be black tie. That's kind of one of the things that I've learned along the way is, just because you're in black tie does not mean people give more. Or just because you're in black tie doesn't mean people are going to step up their social game in any different way. There is a relaxedness when you're in jeans and a sport coat that you don't necessarily have when you're wearing a tuxedo.
I was going to ask about that. Like, what are some of the trends that you maybe have seen over the years that you've been doing this? And how have things evolved? Has it been evolved into more of a mix of casual and black tie affairs?
Absolutely. So, definitely so. And, the McConaughey's gala is the largest in Texas, like I said, but it is not black tie. It is very casual. I would say half the guys don't even wear sport coats. Like they'll wear button downs and they're dressed nicely, but it's not, it's definitely gotten more casual in that regard. But I have seen coming out of COVID, interestingly, I've seen some events where it was historically cocktail attire and they're elevating it to black tie. And a lot of it just really has to do with their base of supporters, because people were indoors for a year and didn't necessarily dress up for a year. So some people are actually more inclined to want to dress up and go out and really turn it out. And others, COVID kind of changed how they view things. And they want to be more casual in their thing. So what I found is that there's actually more of a space now for everybody, in a way that there necessarily wasn't with, big high profile events, 10 or 15 years ago.
Okay. Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Rob, help me understand more of like your connection. How do you interface at these events and, how are you adding value for your guests and for the publications? Because if I'm understanding you correctly, you're working with some of these publications, you're you're attending, and then are you like writing articles, or kind of give me a little bit more of a perspective?
Yeah. So I write articles basically chronicling and highlighting these events all throughout the state of Texas. So I like to call myself a professional guest on duty because, it's different than if you're the event producer because you're having to pay, you're having to really focus on the event and not focus on the experience. I basically am kind of the eyes. I convey the eyes of the audience when I write. So it's definitely a little bit different than most of the other folks that are there because my job is to really write what the people who are there are experiencing and taking them, there. And what I'll say is, all great events have, they have good hosts, but they also have great guests. And, in my experience, you cannot be a good host. You have to be both a good host and a good guest. Basically, they're symbiotic and you need to have both. You can't be a good host and a lousy guest or a lousy host and a good guest. You have to know and understand that. And really good guests, if something happens, they're not going to dwell on it. Whereas, a bad guest will dwell on that. And also it's, my value is, in addition to that, is I'm willing to go up and talk to all different types of people. So, I will talk to a C-suite person, but I'll also, like with that Vogue vignette that I was talking about, I'll also at that same event, I'll sit and I'll talk with Stephanie, who's the owner of it, and we'll just have the best time catching up. So that the value is that I'm talking to a range of people and not a specific person. So there's all different types of ways that guests can really help elevate an experience. Do not have to be black tie. That's kind of one of the things that I've learned along the way is, just because you're in black tie does not mean people give more, or just because you're in black tie doesn't mean people are going to step up their social game in any different way. There is a relaxedness when you're in jeans and a sport coat that you don't necessarily have when you're wearing a tuxedo.
I was going to ask about that. Like, what are some of the trends that you maybe have seen over the years that you've been doing this, and how have things evolved? Has it been evolved into more of a mix of casual and black tie affairs?
Absolutely. So definitely so. And the McConaughey's Gala is the largest in Texas, like I said, but it is not black tie. It is very casual. I would say half the guys don't even wear sport coats. Like, they'll wear button downs and they're dressed nicely, but it's not, it's definitely gotten more casual in that regard. But I have seen, coming out of COVID, interestingly, I've seen some events where it was historically cocktail attire and they're elevating it to black tie. And a lot of it just really has to do with their base of supporters, because people were indoors for a year and didn't necessarily dress up for a year. So some people are actually more inclined to want to dress up and go out and really turn it out. And others, COVID kind of changed how they view things. And they want to be more casual in their thing. So what I found is that there's actually more of a space now for everybody, in a way that there necessarily wasn't with, big high profile events, 10 or 15 years ago.
Okay. Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Rob, help me understand more of like your connection. How do you interface at these events, and, how are you adding value for your guests and for the publications? Because if I'm understanding you correctly, you're working with some of these publications, you're attending, and then are you like writing articles, or kind of give me a little bit more of a perspective?
Yeah. So I write articles basically chronicling and highlighting these events all throughout the state of Texas. So I like to call myself a professional guest on duty because, it's different than if you're the event producer because you're having to pay, you're having to really focus on the event and not focus on the experience. I basically am kind of the eyes. I convey the eyes of the audience when I write. So it's definitely a little bit different than most of the other folks that are there because my job is to really write what the people who are there are experiencing and taking them, there. And what I'll say is, all great events have, they have good hosts, but they also have great guests. And, in my experience, you cannot be a good host. you have to be both a good host and a good guest. Basically, they're symbiotic and you need to have both. You can't be a good host and a lousy guest, or a lousy host and a good guest. You have to know and understand that. And really good guests, if something happens, they're not going to dwell on it. Whereas, a bad guest will dwell on that. And also it's, my value is, in addition to that, is I'm willing to go up and talk to all different types of people. So, I will talk to a C-suite person, but I'll also, like with that Vogue vignette that I was talking about, I'll also at that same event, I'll sit and I'll talk with Stephanie, who's the owner of it, and we'll just have the best time catching up. So that the value is that I'm talking to a range of people and not a specific person. So there's all different types of ways that guests can really help elevate an experience.
Hey there, thanks so much for watching or listening. I wanted to take a moment and share about Common Sense Events. Common Sense Events is my company that professionally manages and operates venues all across the United States, and we're looking to work with a couple more venues this year. If you own a venue in Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, Texas, North Carolina, we are looking to work with you. Our company comes in and takes care of the marketing, the sales, the operations. We hire all of the employees, we manage all the employees, and primarily our agreements are based off of revenue share models. So it's a very affordable way to have your venue professionally managed. And this is especially good if you're thinking about retiring, selling your venue, but maybe you don't want to sell the land, or you're looking for another management option than you currently have in place. If you're interested in this, please reach out by email at venues@cseventservices.com, or you can also click the link in the description of this video or podcast. We'd love to hear from you and look forward to seeing if there's a way for us to serve you.
Yeah. So it's really interesting because we actually have a little bit of experience with what you do here in our area in San Diego. There's a publication called Modern Luxury Magazine.
Yes.
And they do a number of different things. We actually were partnered with them for several years, and we would do all the staffing for all of the events that they would do. And one thing that I've come to realize is it's really important for venues specifically to have the word of mouth connection. But like you said, you go to an event, you might forget what you ate. You might forget, it might be that one venue in your mind. Mm-hmm. But if you can stay top of mind for people, and publications like you do are a huge way to do that. What do you think is a way that a venue owner is listening to this right now, maybe they have a small music venue, maybe they have, an event venue that does a mix of weddings and corporate and things like that. What are some ways that they can get folks like yourself to come and write about the event, talk about the event, be there? Is it an invitation? Do people pay you? Kind of, how do we get you, Rob, right, to our venue to give us a little bit more exposure?
So largely because I do philanthropy, most of it, I'm not paid to go to anything. I basically go to something because I support the cause or I support what they're doing. Mm-hmm. So, for me, it's, I always like to say great events are an ensemble. It doesn't rely on one person alone. And because it's an ensemble, there's going to be rotation in and out of certain things. So I'm always kind of looking for what the next really cool event in various cities are going to be. I would say in order to get me to go to something, it's, do I know, are there high profile people in the community? And for me, it's philanthropists. So if I know that people are big givers in the community, are they tied to it? If they're tied to it, I'm going to be much more likely to say yes than if they're people that I don't necessarily know. Even if they give, they may give in a different way than I'm familiar with. So that's one thing. The other thing is, are you bringing in a specific talent? Because, coming out of COVID, it's interesting because a lot of events, I've seen them really up their game, and a lot of them are making sure that there are people headlining their events now. So, you get to see these great musical performances in spaces, with major artists in spaces of, anywhere from 300 to 1,000 people. And that's a really cool, unique, interesting thing. So, it's, those are things. And then 3, if you've got a really interesting theme, that is definitely something that will, definitely pique my interest. If I haven't experienced that theme, or it's a theme that I've had good feelings with, like we've talked about, remembering how you feel. Like I always like, a really good, Roaring 20s theme party. I like a really good Studio 54 theme party. And if I haven't gone to one in 6 months, I might be like, what? It's time to break out my pink ruffle shirt that I have, throw on my favorite tux jacket over it, and go out the door. So it's just, any one of those three things and if you have all three, that's going to make me much more likely to say, yes, I'm going to go. But that's a way to kind of go, for me to kind of vet out the invitations that I get and really allow me to kind of hone in and then also, have a personal life outside of going to all these events.
I'm curious, Rob, how much does catering matter when you're going to an event like this? I know the focus is maybe not towards them, but like, how much are you noticing it?
I notice it, especially if it's good. The one trend that I have seen that I actually really do like is family style. And I've had some, and I tend to, just because sometimes I'll be going to 2 or sometimes even 3 different events in a night, I often don't necessarily eat, but, I have found that when I do stay, I do like family style because 1, it's less wasteful. 2, the food is hotter, so it's not overcooked. It's not sitting there. And it offers a more communal experience for everyone that's involved. It actually almost kind of, I don't want to say it forces people to engage with one another, but you've got to ask someone, pass the potatoes, pass the chicken, pass whatever it is to really kind of create that more communal feeling. So I actually am a big believer in that. And that's also a way, especially if it's not black tie, that actually kind of leans more into the informalness, in terms of that. So that's one thing from a catering perspective that, I definitely hope I see more of in 2024, just because I do like that as an experience overall. It does create a better experience all around in my mind.
Yeah. Help me and the audience really understand. So you said you've been to a mixture, primarily there at hotels, you said, but then, any event that maybe is trying to do something a little bit different, a fundraiser, say, something like that, they may not go to a hotel. They might go to more of like a performance venue or some venue that might be even a little bit more off the beaten path, but is going to add a cool factor to it.
Yes.
In some sense. Can you help me understand what are some cool spaces that you've been to, and how does a venue owner who's listening to this right now, who'd maybe love to be hosting something like this, what can they do to elevate their venue to maybe attract more of this type of clientele that are going to be having these fundraisers and events like this?
So one way to do it is if you have a stage, do a dinner on stage. There's just something really interesting about having that different point of view. Now, those have to be kind of smaller, more intimate events, obviously, just because the stages are what they are. But depending on the size of the stage, you can fit anywhere from, and especially if they've got an extender on it that they can extend, the stage out, you can have anywhere from 200, I would say 100 to, I went to one recently that was on the stage of the Windspear Opera House, which, could seat about 300, and you just had this beautiful, world-class, magnificent, you were looking out into the audience and you were just getting a different perspective. So, if you're a performance venue, that's definitely one way that you can do it. I've also been to things. So there's a big event in Austin every year called EASB Live, and they host everything at Camp Mabry, which is Austin's military base. So you'll be driving down one of the major expressways and kind of off in the distance, you can see this giant tent, with 1,000 people at it, at this, event that raises $1.5 million. So there's all kinds of really different ways, that you can really draw a major crowd. So, I don't think anyone was expecting me to say, I go to $1 million gala on a military base. That just goes to show that any space with the right people and the right support in the community can really draw those people out.
Yeah. I love that you said that. We actually did an event at it's not a private airport, but it's a smaller airport here. And they did it in a hangar, and they did this whole, and it was actually it was 2019. So it was right pre-COVID, which is kind of ironic because the whole thing was traveling. The whole thing was around traveling. Yeah. So the side tables were made up of retro luggage. And,
fantastic.
So very, very cool. Almost had like a Catch Me If You Can, vibe to it. A little bit of, I don't know. It was a really cool event, and it was for a fundraiser. And so I think that was probably off the beaten path of what the airport typically did. But again, a beautiful adaptation.
Absolutely. And I've done one of those types of events too. And they're super, it's super fun, especially if you've got a space that it's unique and you've got to get people out there. just because you may be having a hard time, it's really about, you've got to have the right people mixed with the right place, especially if you want a crowd. And I always recommend get involved with your community, get involved in nonprofit. I mean, part of it with event spaces is a lot of them, they'll either offer discounts or sometimes even donate to space to get those mix of people in that they want to get in, so that it's used either for their own personal private events, which they'll be able to charge a lot more for. They use it almost as a lead magnet opportunity to do that. So regardless of your space, make sure you're looking at who are the people you want to patron it in your community. And is there a specific niche of people you want to patron it in your community and beyond? And lean into, how do I attract that there? And to me, there's no better way than getting involved in your community on a nonprofit or even a professional networking basis.
I so love that you said that. I think that's gold. And, we'll clip that up, because venues are so location based, location driven. You have to drive to them. For some venues, the focus for a lot of the owners, a lot of the teams that are running it is on marketing, paid ads, showing up on Instagram, Facebook, doing, all the different things. But there's nothing quite like you said, partnering with a local community. Maybe it's a cause. Maybe it's even something as simple as a food pantry or something like that. But now you're bringing the community in. I love that.
Absolutely.
That's huge. Rob, I want to go off script here and spend the last 10 or 15 minutes I tapping into what I know is a skill you have. You're at all these events. You're constantly networking and connecting with people. And I'm curious, what does it take to connect with these people, to, remember names, to are you a super extroverted person? Is this something that you had to learn? There's so much of your job that's just focused on networking. How do you make it happen?
So I am not a natural extrovert by any means. Thankfully, my husband and we run our publication together. He is an extrovert. So because of that, I had the luxury of, and what I have learned along the way is I've been to over 2,000 events. I have never been to a successful one that does not have a mix of extroverts, introverted extroverts, and introverts. So the thing I want to say is, you do not want, as an event venue space, you do not want 250 extroverts at your event. It will probably get damaged. There will probably be an altercation because there's not enough oxygen in the room for 250 people who want to be the star. You have to have that mix of energies to do that. And that said, kind of going into your question a little bit more on how do you engage, part of it is that I tend to, especially when I approach a famous person, if I know they're going to be there, I will do a little bit of reading, but I'll tend to read stuff about earlier in their life before they became famous. Because the one thing that I've learned is, think about what you do for a living. Someone that comes up and asks you something that you do all day, every day, and you get asked all the time, it doesn't really engage you. You just answer it because you have a canned answer. Whereas if you ask them something about earlier in their career, they're going to stop, they're going to think, and you'll actually have a lengthy conversation with them. So especially if high profile people are going to be there, make sure that you're, doing not stalkery research, but if you know someone's going to be there and they're in the public eye in some way, shape, or form, even if they're a CEO, look at those things. Did you go to the same college? Are you on a board now that they were on a board on 15 years ago? Find that common connection that's not the obvious one. And when you do that, you're going to be much more likely to have conversations with more substance, because if you're kind of doing it with what everyone knows for, those tend to be the more superficial ones. So, I lean into the fact, and, I have a practice, and I think I talked about this offline, that I'm doing called the event mindset, where I help people realize that based on their personality type, it's valuable, it's important, and you can contribute regardless of how introverted or how extroverted you are. You can contribute to the event, but it's just leaning in on that and not getting caught up on, I need to be the life of the party. Because that's why, introverts or introverted extroverts don't like parties, is they think they have to be that. And I have learned, thankfully, you don't. And that's really my way of how I want to kind of pay it forward and help others realize that a great event needs that ensemble, like I was talking about. And that ensemble is different types of personalities and different characters, quite frankly.
Yeah, that's cool. And I think it's probably encouraging for some people listening or watching, because it's, there is some of that pressure. Oh, I'm going to an event, I have to be social. You don't necessarily have to, like you said, take all the oxygen. Like, you can be the one who is maybe holding some space. The pauses are not necessarily a bad thing. Listening, right? A lot of those things. If you are introverted or you are not super comfortable yet, let's say yet, right, in these types of social environments, but you need to go, you want to go, what are some ways? And I know you said you go with your husband, and you're probably, if you have a partner, spouse, whoever who is going to an event with you, you can kind of work with them to, not always have to be the one who's talking. But what are some other ways that you have seen that you can spark up conversation with people without having to be this gregarious, outgoing, extroverted type?
So there's several ways that you can do it. My favorite thing to do, and I always it's almost like a warm-up exercise. So if I'm in something where I don't know that many people, what I'll do is I'll look around and I'll see if there's 3 bars. I'll actually go to the bar with the longest line. And that way I'm standing in line, and it forces me to say hello to the person in front of or behind me. And most of the time it's not going to be a meaningful connection, but it's a connection to kind of pass the time by. So if you're more introverted, it's a good way for you to kind of warm up and kind of just get a little bit more acclimated within the space, especially if you're not necessarily as comfortable. I always really like that. And that way you can just say, do you know what the signature cocktail is? What brought you here tonight? That you can do those really common questions, because everyone's got something in common. It's the cause, the bride and groom, whatever it is. But, just start and lead with that question, and it allows an introvert in particular to just warm up in a space where they're kind of there, they're stuck there, and they've at least got a goal at the end. They're going to get a beverage. They're going to get a glass of wine. They're going to get a cocktail. They've got something that they've kind of got to be in line for. So it's almost purpose driven, but it allows people to just acclimate into the space.
Rob, I like that you said, how did you get here? How did you hear about this event or something like that? Because then that could potentially uncover a couple of things that you could work with, right? What they do is their profession, maybe a relationship to someone else. Something that you said earlier that I think may be a part of this is you said, was it a pink ruffle jacket you said you had?
I have a pink, for Studio 54 parties, I have a pink ruffled tuxedo shirt that I bought at a thrift store in Los Angeles a million years ago.
Perfect. So something like that, I think for both our introverts and our extroverts, I've seen that if you give someone else the opportunity to compliment you on something or point out something about your outfit that is a little bit unique or different, it allows people the opportunity to break the ice with you, because we may be uncomfortable, but other people are uncomfortable as well. And when you're wearing cool shoes and you're like, hey, Rob, I love your shoes, or, hey man, I love your shoes. What do you do here? Then that kind of gets the ball rolling for other people, right?
Absolutely. Well, and it's funny you bring that up, because that happened when I was in Houston a few months ago. So, I was in a gray tux. My husband was in a blue tux, and we were at, a gala. It's one of Houston's top ones. This is for the Holocaust Museum of Houston. And literally this couple just came up and were like, you two don't look like you're from here. Tell me about yourself. And I just busted out laughing, because it was just something and it wasn't me, but they were so charming and funny that, we talked to them for a half an hour, and it was just really interesting to kind of get to know these people I would have never known otherwise. But and actually it's a Houstonian's, her name's Lynn Wyatt. So anyone who's interested in her, Google her. But she has a credo. It's basically 3 things for any ensemble. It's class with a dash of sass, never trash. And if you do that and you bring your personality into an event, and it can be something as simple as a pocket square. And, for guys who are watching, you got a nice watch, wear it. Someone with an eye will notice it, and they will ask you a question about it. If you like cufflinks, showcase that, scarves, whatever it is. But there's a whole range of accessories that anyone can wear. And I always like to lean in on accessories more than the main thing a person's wearing. But if you lean in on that, one, it shows you're paying attention to details. And if you're paying attention to details, people are going to feel more open because you're seeing them. You're not seeing them superficially, but you're actually seeing them. And that's the great thing about complimenting a detail is people get to be more fully seen. It's like the celebrity I was talking about earlier. When you ask them about something earlier in their career that most people don't know, it's going to disarm them. And that's a really great way to disarm somebody.
Yeah, I love that. Rob, these are some really great tips. And I think that, someone who's listening to this, you go to an event after this and you're like, oh yeah, Rob said, oh yeah, I heard that. And that's important because, especially post-COVID, I think getting out and connecting, when we have the opportunity to do that, that's where we can really create some really meaningful relationships, and broaden our network, right?
Absolutely.
And many of us don't get the luxury like you do of going to all these really cool events, but I appreciate your point of view on this and kind of how we can help make better experiences at these events. And, tell me a little bit about the new service that you're
Yeah. So it's called the Event Mindset. And basically what I do is I work with individuals and businesses to help them basically be good host and guest at cocktail parties, business meals, galas, fundraisers, networking events, and all those types of things. So I always start with, like I was saying, I start with identifying someone's personality type. And then from there, we kind of work on strategies to allow people to be good guest and host, leaning into those natural traits that you already have. So, and if you're an introvert listening, I was one too. I threw parties in high school where nobody showed up. I get it. I've been where you are. But if you believe in yourself and you realize that you're not the star, you're part of an ensemble cast. Once you realize that, the world can really just open up for you in ways that you've never really could expect. And, I certainly have gotten to experience things over the years because I showed up. I showed up and act like I want to be there. And when you do those things, all those other things in your personality and who you may be feuding with and all those things, they really do go by the wayside.
Mm-hmm. So true. So true. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. If people want to connect with you or they want to hear more about that service, where's the best place to find you?
Email me, rob@eventmindset.com, or find me on Instagram at Rob Giardinelli or LinkedIn at Rob Giardinelli, Giardinelli.
Very cool. Rob, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been a lot of fun. And hey, maybe I'll bump you into Texas one day.
I love it. We always love welcoming, you said you grew up here, so we welcome you back with open arms.
Very cool.
Thank you again for having me, Jonathan. I really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun.
You got it.
Hey there friends, Jonathan here, and I wanted to share about Common Sense Events Management Services. Common Sense Events is my company, and we professionally manage and operate venues all across the United States, and we would love to have the opportunity to chat about your venue if management would be the right solution for you. This is a great opportunity for people who are looking to maybe get out of the industry, or maybe they want to keep their property, but they don't want to sell it, but they still want to make money from it. Our team comes in and we do everything from the marketing, the sales, the operations. We hire a local team. We take care of the taxes. We pay them. We keep them accountable. We take care of all the management. We do all the sales process. We do all the operations, everything from setting up to tearing down tables and chairs, and everything that it takes to run an incredible wedding. The best part about this all, it is not super expensive. We actually have a lot of these agreements set up as management contracts where there's a revenue share. And so it is really a awesome and frequently affordable way to work with an outsourced management company so that your venue stays under your brand name, but you have a custom venue management solution for you so you don't have to be working 80 hours a week. If this sounds appealing to you, please send us a message using the link in the description of this video or podcast. You could also send us an email at venues@cseventservices.com. We would absolutely love to hear from you and see if there's a way that we could partner with you and serve you.